How to take flash pictures. Part 1. The pop-up flash. What we will cover in the flash series. In Part 1, general types of flashes, the pop-up flash, limitations, and setup of the camera and flash. In Part 2, we'll talk about the shoe flash. In Part 3, beyond the basics, problems and techniques. General types of flashes. Number 1 is the pop-up flash, which we'll cover here in Part 1. This is the part of most non-pro cameras. Number 2, shoe flashes. We will cover that in Part 2. This is for cameras without a pop-up flash. Pop-up flash. As you can see in this picture, it pops up from the top of the camera. In some cameras, they will pop up in a different manner. But generally, on the top of the camera, it will pop up, so you always have it with you. Pros. Convenient. Most non-pro cameras will have a pop-up flash, so you have the flash with you. Easy to use. Flash operation is part of the camera. Cons. Not as powerful as a shoe flash. It is also very close to the lens, so you have a condition called red eye. That will be covered in Part 3 of the flash series. And it uses the camera's battery. It does not have a separate battery, so if you use the flash a lot, you will be draining your camera's battery. Limitations. Limited range, limited depth of lighting, and cannot shoot continuous rapid shots. Range and depth of lighting. Closer subjects will get more light than farther subjects. As you can see in this picture, the girl in the front is overexposed. The lady in the background is underexposed. From front to back, a flash will not illuminate everybody evenly. It can only illuminate at a certain distance. In front, it'll be overexposed, and back, it'll be underexposed. Continuous and rapid shooting. Caution. A flash generates heat. The case of a flash and the camera is made of plastic. Plastic is a heat insulator, not a heat conductor. Heat is conducted slowly. Heat will build up until there is a thermal failure of the flash. What that means is something will either burn out or melt. This is why you do not shoot in continuous mode with a flash or a lot of single shots in sequence. Setup for flash. Configure the camera. Read the manual for your camera. Your camera may have a different setup than what I'll be talking about right here. Shutter, set for single shot. Autofocus, set for single. Exposure mode, mode S, set the shutter speed to 1/25 of a second. ISO, set auto ISO to off. ISO level depends on distance. I usually start at 400 and then go up or down as I need to. And finally, remove the lens hood. This is why you remove the lens hood when using the pop-up flash. Look at the picture below of a classroom. Now look at the desk in the center bottom. You see there is a dark half-moon shadow? That shadow is caused by the flash being blocked by the lens hood, so you're seeing the shadow of the lens hood on that desk. So when you use a flash, pop-up flash, take off the lens hood. Next problem that is related to this. This was shot with an 18-140 lens. If you use one of the ultra zooms, like an 18-200, 18-300, or 18-400, the lens is long. Even if you take off the lens hood, it'll be long enough to cast this shadow. So you need to check your camera, your flash, and your lens to see whether you need to take off the hood, and even if the lens is so long that it will cast a shadow. This is where the short lens, like the 18-55, comes in. It is short enough that it will not cast a shadow. Test the camera flash setup. Test it before your event. Test it in the classroom. Make sure everything works. Adjust as needed. When you're there, you may need to adjust the ISO level up or down. In some cases, the flash power level. Flash exposure compensation may have to be adjusted. Flash exposure is just like the camera. It's based on what the camera sees reflected back at it. And if there is something in the environment that is reflecting more light or less light back to the camera, you may need to adjust the compensation for it. The end. Please go on to part 2, and please like and subscribe.